is of the national team at the end of the day.
Yeah. Roberto, I think in the United States, politicians considered liberals here would generally be seen in Europe as centrists.
Absolutely.
Angela Merkel is, by German standards, a conservative. By American standards, Trump's always denouncing her as being a lefty. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that America was settled primarily in the early years of it by people who were excluded from the guilds in Europe. That's why they came here seeking more opportunity. And that has carried down through generation after generation, this hostility to things like unions. And secondly, we have a whole series of mechanisms in this country to see to it that the lower your income, the less likely you are to vote. We have Tuesday voting. We have these efforts now at voter ID and other things to discourage people. And every election in the last 20 years, we've had these robocalls that have been made to the homes of lesser educated Black and brown people saying, if you go to the polls, you're going to be arrested. And that's intimidated people. I think we may be, and we're going to know in November, but I think we may be on the cusp of a very great maturing of American politics and culture. That Donald Trump, if he is roundly defeated and the Republicans lose the Senate, the Democrats are certainly going to keep the House. But if they lose both the White House and the Senate, and Trump is soundly defeated, I think we may be moving into a new era and being more like Europe. That's been the great fear of the right wing in America, that we will become like Europe with universal health care, which saves a ton of money, with more labor protections.
Yeah, actually think about that, Roberto. Our fear is to become more like Europe. Just think about that one for a while. We're scared to death. We could become like Europe. They have universal health care and things like that. I mean,
funny thing is that we Europeans aim and want to be like you.
Yeah, of course. We're America. Look at us. We lead the world. Who leads the world in coronavirus today? We do. Who leads the world in the most deaths in coronavirus? We do. Who has the most expensive healthcare system in the world? We do. And who does the best?
I don't know. Because we managed to have a couple of court cases every year where people has been corrupt because we paid 3 times the normal price. But then again,
yeah. I mean,
I don't go very proud of it.
Expensive, I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So we like to lead in everything. David, just a question for you. What about the people that say, hey, this lockdown is, a communist plot. We want to be out there, and they're doing it right now, opening it up while we're at the height of the coronavirus, opening up all the cities of the world, the United States, so we can go out and meet and greet. Is that going to have an adverse effect?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, we are still on a rising plane of deaths. We had the highest number of deaths in America over the weekend, 3,000. We're going to have a second wave of this and maybe a third wave. There are a lot of people who convince themselves, thinking if I take vitamin C, which likewise the doctor you said, I think that's been proven to have no therapeutic value, that we are going to have continued spread of this virus. We're not going to get to an R, that's the rate at which the virus is spread, that's below 1. And there's some limited evidence that many people who are infected do not develop antibodies. That's a really scary prospect. If we have any kind of a pathogen that you don't develop antibodies to, that would mean this could be going on continuously. So I think these are real fundamental concerns. And when you see people out walking very close to each other, bringing their children, my word for them is idiots, in the classic Greek meaning of that word 2,500 years ago, which is someone who had no regard for anyone else, only themselves. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It just means they don't regard other people. They're idiots.
Right. Well, here's my prediction, and Kim knows I made a prediction a couple months ago that we were going to go over 1 million people infected and 60,000 deaths by the end of the month. We did pass that. My prediction was right on, and so I'm making another prediction. Okay, and I'll do it right now.
Yeah.
And you can see how my predictions could have recorded, but this one's an easy one, just like that one. Okay, and here's the prediction. By the end of this month, we will have over 100,000 deaths in the United States and 2 million people that will be infected. And here's the reason why. You wouldn't believe it. They're saying it's a free-for-all out there. In other words, there is no protection, there is no guidance, there is no leadership. And when we looked at the leadership, and this really bothered me, okay? This is a medical condition last time I looked at, right, David? Right. So when you have a medical condition, do you go see your mirror to help you? I mean, it's ridiculous.
So you go see an economist.
Yeah, you have a medical condition. You're going to go see an economist? Are you kidding me? Okay, you have a medical condition. I'm going to go see my politician. No, when you have a medical condition, you're going to go see a doctor, right? If you got a brain. When we have a leader who's going to lead us out of this, the first thing he brought in was the vice president of the United States, who was a politician, who had no medical background whatsoever. There was a book called The Best and the Brightest by David Halberstam years ago. Okay, you probably read it. I was forced to read it. Okay, and what Kennedy did, he said, I'm going to bring the best and the brightest together to solve the problem. And the best and the brightest are not politicians to solve a medical problem. I am sorry. And if I have a heart disease, I'm not going to go, I like my mayor, but I'm not going to go see him. I love my county commissioners. I'm not going to see them. I'm going to go see a bloody doctor. This is a medical condition. It's not being led by a team of, and we have purportedly some of the best doctors in the world. And notice I said some. If you go worldwide, you will find the best doctors in the world. But here, when they said, well, I'm going to bring a team together, it's always limited to the United States. We don't even look outside of the U.S. and see what they're doing. Look at what we had Rikish on from Hong Kong. How are you doing in Hong Kong? You should have like thousands of deaths. They have 4. Okay. What's happened to the infection? Okay, they've already have a solution, or at least they're working on it. And what we're doing is we're walking around like, well, I don't know what to do. Let's do an experiment between the states. Let's have Las Vegas be an experiment city. Okay, what are we using to think with here? I mean, our leadership lives in a vacuum, and it's not rocket science. I'm sorry. We have the best and the brightest people, or some of them. If you go worldwide, you get all of them, obviously. And these people are sitting in the background. You never hear of them. In other words, they're like, all you hear is from politics.
Well, and the ones like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx obviously are having to play to Donald so that he doesn't get rid of them. I mean, you can see the pained expressions, the almost hostage video quality of some of their remarks, where they're trying to manage Donald because he doesn't get science. He doesn't know anything. I mean, an interesting contrast to this is, you can like or not like Obama, and I wrote lots of very critical things about Obama and the Obama administration, but the man had a very elegant mind. And John Holdren, his science advisor, told me that he would complain that the papers he would take up to read every night in the residence were too short. And he wanted not 2 pages, but 16 or 18. And he would ask very smart questions because he conceptually got science and wanted to learn. Donald gets up with this just crazy stuff all the time, but he stays with his crowd stays with him. They're very deeply bonded. And one of the things George Lakoff has taught is that if you can take this fatherly bond, this authoritarian bond, and break it, it's devastating. It is a really serious break. And that's one of the reasons that I've repeatedly recommended, make fun of Donald. He's incapable of laughing at himself. So make fun of him, because he'll do crazy things that, this election is about margins. All elections are about margins, but the number of voters in play here is a lot more than in recent 40 years of elections.
Oh, let me tell you about this election that I'm a little upset about. Is, okay, he sent out the stimulus check to a lot of people, right?
His name on it.
But not just his name on it. Whatever. He sent a letter saying, I made sure you got a check. Have you read it? Have you read the letter?
Oh, yes. And of course,
good
it's
marketing. Come on, that's good marketing.
There was one of the richest persons in Naples. He was running a huge company, a huge shipping company, Actually, one of the ships of his crew of his company was hijacked in the 80s. The name was Achille Lauro, and he decided that he wanted to become mayor in Naples and run the municipality in Naples. What he did was basically he went to all the people and basically gifted them pasta, something to eat, and one shoe. And when people say, "Oh, why are you giving me one shoe, only one shoe?" and he says, "Oh, if I get elected, you get the other one."
Okay, well that's politics. Okay, and the same thing with the check. I mean, the whole thing is that that's not good marketing on the dots thing.
There's one thing which I mean, like Berlusconi. I know it looks like Italy is the center of the world, but really Berlusconi, Boris Johnson, Putin is a little bit different because he has some kind of different features, let's say. But all those people drives on people who loves them unconditionally and who never challenge them.
Sure. Yeah, I mean
that's the first thing. And the other thing is that most of the base, I mean, Berlusconi was elected because he was very similar to most of the base who elected him.
Mm-hmm.
He loved football, he loved women, he wanted good food, he was rich, and and there is this strange thing which has been, I think, accelerated by the new media, social media, where rich is being rich and becoming rich without having actually any substance is kind of a new value. And I mean, I heard a lot of people say the same thing which they say about Trump. Wow, if Berlusconi was if Berlusconi was a successful entrepreneur, he will be a successful politician. But the Donald is bankrupt something like 10 times, but in Italy you have still a kind of stigma if you get bankrupt.
Yeah.
In the old days, you were actually disqualified from being an entrepreneur.
Roberto, in 57 years ago, Martin Luther King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech, in which he said, "I hope that my 4 children will grow up in a world where they will be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character." And what we've developed in America since Reagan came to power is a belief that it is the content of your wallet, or in Donald's case, the claimed content of your wallets, because he's not a billionaire, that is a measure. And we need to get back to virtues. We need to get back to recognizing that it is wisdom and sound judgment and respect for others and empathy that we want to honor in people, and get away from money porn. Money porn has been devastating to America. And I don't have anything against money. I went to work at 10 and full-time at 13 because I was in a poor family, and I'm a wealthy man by any reasonable standard. People in Wall Street would think I'm a pipsqueak, but by any reasonable standard, I'm a wealthy man. And so that's not an argument against people being successful and being wealthy, but it is an argument that we really do need to respect and honor and pay attention to judgment, education, and other virtues. And Donald Trump and Berlusconi, I think, are sort of the antis to that.
Well, you know what? I mean, I fully agree, David. I fully agree with you. And one of the main problems now is that school has been degrading. I don't know the level of schools and what you get from school in Europe is going worse and worse and worse every year. But there's a fantastic, there are those French comedies which are usually very aggressive on the social side. There is one of which is I think 2003, 2002. It's a way. I mean, it's at least 10 years old comedy where basically there is a crisis and this rich family from the center of Paris has to basically host a homeless guy which is grow up in Saint Denis, which is one of the banlieues, and they speak about politics and whatever, and there's one line where basically he says, well, I'm a racist because I'm in Saint Denis. It's easy not to be racist when you live in the 19th arrondissement, which is the center of Paris. But the real problem is that from the Reagan area, there's been all over the world in the modern Western countries, there's been a gap between rich people and others, which has grown and grown and grown. And and the problem is that this kind of gap between the two communities is basically cannot be filled anymore. And most of the people is uneducated, extremely poor. And if you can appeal to this kind of people, you can get whatever you want. I mean, in Europe now, it's this called populism. Populism is, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's something different from what they really are. They try to basically gain on the fear of the people, whatever it is, immigration, healthcare, poverty, unemployment. It's because you have the biggest part of the society is poor, and they resent, they really hate people who's rich, because they think that everybody who's rich has become rich not because he worked or he or she worked or studied or whatever, because somebody basically gifted richness or wealthiness or whatever to those people. It's when if we want to get rid of people who can be so divisive and dangerous for democracy, and I actually don't think that Trump is that dangerous for democracy, but others are. The only way to do this is to try to improve the condition of the most part of society, which is basically one of those tasks which is almost impossible.
Well, actually, I would argue that it's not. The average income of the bottom 90% of Americans, what I call the vast majority, 90%, is essentially unchanged from 1969 to 2018. Their income went up on the annual basis, on average, $218. I mean, I don't know who's going to notice the $4 and something in their paycheck gross every week. So it's been flat for 50 years. But that's because we got rid of unions. We allowed all of these monopolies to rise up, monopolies and duopolies and triopolies. And I think duopolies and triopolies are much worse than monopolies. We created all these make-work jobs in things like clerks and health insurance to process your claims and drive you crazy. And we stopped setting up a system where we have significant domestic capital investment. Our Congress has literally said to companies for years, go invest your money offshore and you will earn a higher rate of return, and we will give you various tax holidays to encourage that. And we now have a law that says you'd be an idiot to invest in a lot of things here in the US, capital intensive things, if you can make a deal in another country to pay little or no tax. So my argument is inequality in America, while partly driven by new technologies, as always happens when there's a breakthrough in a technology, is largely the result of government policies. And since we elect our officials, whether we meant to or not, we chose those policies. We can unchoose them. We can raise the average income in the United States and the median income quickly and significantly if we change our policies.
Yeah, but David, see, here's the problem. Since I spent most of my career doing estate planning with the wealthy Americans, and I grew up in a household that was basically a third-generation banking family from 1944, where they founded a company called Bank One that became Chase Bank, by the way.
So serious poverty in your background.
No serious poverty. As a matter of fact, somebody asked me, because when I own multiple homes, they were going like, did you grow up poor? No. Okay, so the thing is,
I'll put it to you this way: he didn't know what a styrofoam plate was.
But here's
he didn't know what a styrofoam plate was when I met him.
No. Thing is,
we were at a function. And he goes, "I eat on this."
I don't eat at food trucks, and I don't hang out. But let me tell you, and I spent a good deal of my time in a place called Naples, Florida, and Palm Beach, Fort Myers, and Boca Raton. Matter of fact, I had a house in the best neighborhood called St. Andrews Country Club. Why? Because I was getting this snobby thing. I was living in Boca Fontana, which was a nice community by any standards. And as I told the country club crowd, where you live? I live in Boca. Where in Boca? I was going, what is this about? I said, Boca Fontana. And they would do like that. So I found out what is the best and most expensive country club in Boca. It was St. Andrews Country Club, and I bought a house there. Then when people ask me a question, where do you live? I live in Boca. Where in Boca? St. Andrews Country Club. Shut up, everybody. Because they know it was the most expensive country club in the city of Boca to live. Okay. And you find out that there's this whole cult, literally, of wealthy people. I mean, and they think differently than poor people, like big time different.
They love, one of the best tax avoidance lawyers in America.
Sure.
He teaches at, no. The guy who teaches at the law school now at USC and used to be head of the Joint Committee on Taxation.
Oh, gosh, what was his name? Yeah, because I follow him all the time.
Anyhow, Ed, he in his book about how we raise money and how we spend money, he says, people like me talk about marginal utility. What difference does it make if you have one more dollar when you have $1 billion? And he said, that's not my experience with my clients. My experience with my clients is they love their money.
Oh, yeah.
They love their money. They totally love it. And they want more money. There isn't enough money, no matter how much they have.
Yeah.
And I think we need to recognize that. The ancient Greeks had a way of dealing with that.
Which was?
They honored people who paid big taxes. Yeah. They celebrated them. I think we should celebrate these people and make them public what they're paying.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
I'm being facetious.
No, I agree with you.
Kleinbart.
Okay. Listen, David, you're speaking heresy. Okay. Let me tell you that is heresy, because one thing I did find out, hanging out, like one of my clients was the founder of Dunkin' Donuts, the president of Kimberly-Clark, the president of Bausch and Lomb, okay, the president of Philip Morris. These are the people that I went to their homes, spent a lot of time with. I spent most of my.
I have a lot of friends who are, I have a couple of friends in the billionaire class. So I understand this.
And when I went to the University of Miami Law School, I found out, even though I was from a very well-to-do Tampa family, the guy I was in school with was Stuart Miller, whose dad was Leonard Miller of the Leonard Court. Okay, and then all of a sudden you go, hey, I'm poor. In other words, when you hang around billionaires, you realize, hey, I'm poor.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
I didn't know that. But they had several things that were in common. And Dr. Tom Stanley at Georgia State wrote extensively about the millionaire next door, not the billionaire, because there's a little bit of a difference. But the thing is, they were parsimonious, AAK, tight and cheap. In other words, this whole idea that they're going to spend a lot of money and give money away, no. That is not in their vocabulary. Ain't going to happen. They hate taxes, and they hate the fact that people are trying to take their money and give it to whoever. There is no we, it's about them. Okay. Yeah. We and them is a whole different story. I don't believe the average American even understands. Now, here's the other thing. They work their butts off. These guys work really hard for that dollar bill. They will outwork the regular worker tremendously. So they do feel entitled, because they go, hey, I work 12 hours a day. These guys work 6 or 8 or whatever they work, and they work their butts off. So they had things in common. Here's the other thing they had in common. Some of these people are the nicest people in the world, but come on, you visit that, they live well. They live in nice mansions. I mean, it's a whole different way of life and a way of thinking that the average American has no clue. And they are financially savvy. Very. And what happens is the average person on the street has this financial education compared to them. They're illiterate. They don't know anything about basic finances. They know nothing, the difference between a stock and a dividend. And so
they don't understand interest. They borrow money at ridiculous interest rates because they know better. I have a friend who's a quarter billionaire. And he started out poor. He went to college on scholarships.
Sure.
And we were having dinner one night at his house, and he was telling me, before a group of us all had dinner there, in his living room, which had original paintings it had a Moreau and a Titian, and I forget what else. That he works very hard to make sure his children don't realize how rich he is.
Right. Well, that's
He did
kind
do
of hard
things
if you have
I have no idea what kind of
Yeah, he did require them to work in various, jobs kids work in, so they had an understanding of this. But anyway, he and I got into a little discussion, and I turned to him and I said, my guess is you have written checks to the government for your federal income tax in some years that exceed my lifetime earnings,
Right.
which I'm going to guess are roughly $5 million at this point.
Right.
And he said, "Oh yeah," and I said, "And what hurts," and I said, "and you pay probably a lower tax rate than I do because yours is almost all capital income and mine is labor income."
Percentage-wise.
And he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "And you want what hurts you isn't the percentage, it's the dollars. You sit there and say, boy, what I could do with those millions of dollars to build my business.
Right.
And here's the reason you need to do that. Because if other people don't come along and get the breaks you got, the scholarships and subsidies to get an education to get ahead, then nobody's going to be better off. You're better off when everybody is better off, pal."
Okay.
He and I had lunch for months, for several years, once a month. And that always sort of stuck with him. And I could see him fighting with it. He doesn't want to believe that. And yet logic side of him would say, well, of course.
Right.
But you see, you're exactly right about describing people. And by the way, I'm a literally 21st century tried and convicted heretic.
Right.
So,
okay. Right. Yeah.
tried
I
for
would have no
heresy and
doubt.
convicted.
Right. Yeah, but the thing is you are speaking heresy when you're saying, okay, they need to get better, and that's true. I would like them to be more successful, and it's up to them. In other words, wait, you want me to give my hard-earned money to them? Give them?
I don't want people to give money. I want to set up a system where you invest your capital here. We make it lucrative to do so. And we have rights for workers, and compared to Europe, workers have no rights in this country.
Oh yeah.
I leave you with one. I love history, as you have maybe noticed. I leave you with one thing that is, if you go back in history, it's the same way of thinking as the French aristocrats before the French Revolution. The famous people doesn't have bread, give them croissant at the end of the day. Remember that it ended up not very good for the aristocrats. So there's one thing which people who has power and is rich doesn't understand is if you don't, one is, of course, you get richer and richer and richer because you exploit poor people. But on the other side, poor people gets a little bit upset, let's say, and maybe being upset can be more dangerous than getting richer and richer and richer. So giving them back money maybe is the best way to get to the next generation and avoid other things. I love my head, and I wanted to keep with the rest of the body.
That's right. I don't want to lose my head.
Right. But see, that's European.
I agree with you.
Dude, that's a European thing. Over here, you have your freedom. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, because we're free to do anything we want,
but
don't mean I have to give money.
He wants to keep his head there with his body.
It's good as long as people doesn't get organized themselves. But if poor people, if a poor black and brown community starts to be organized and basically assaults Savannah, Georgia, or whatever, and kills all the rich people in the country, then
but see, conversely, Roberto, some of the poor people over here don't know they're poor because who their friends are. They're all poor people and they all think the same, and they've never spent time with wealthy individuals. They have no clue who they are, what they think. A wealthy individual in Naples or Palm Beach is something they never really spent any time
with. There's always some housewife or desperate OC wives or housewives from Florida, basketball housewives, which shows how rich people live. So That's
Yeah,
that's
they show them how they live, but that's like watching a cartoon. There's a difference between showing how wealthy people live and then living like a wealthy person.
Yeah.
That's a big stretch. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why you spend a lot of money to go to private schools like the University of Miami, or I went to University of Denver, is mainly it's a social class thing. You just don't want to hang around the people that went to state schools. And I will tell you, here's the funny thing. Even though the tuition is extremely expensive at Miami, no one complained about it because they had plenty of money. At South Florida, I went to school because I went to a state school for a while. They all complained, and the tuition was like 1/4, and they could barely afford it. There is a big wealth gap in the United States that people don't know about and they don't even want to talk about. And our education system doesn't help because they're just starting some classes in financial fitness and literacy. But in reality, you go through your entire career of education here, and here's what you get trained on: finance, which is one of the most important things that you will ever experience in your life, is being financially fit. I mean, it dictates everything that you do. It dictates your marriages, how long your marriage is going to stand. It dictates your house you're going to live in, the cars you're going to afford, the bank account. It dictates everything. And your education is this in the United States. Why is that? Algebra 1 is very helpful. Don't get me wrong if you're going to be an engineer. But other than that, come on, basic financial planning should be front and center to everybody. So there's only 2 reasons. Well, there's several different reasons why that doesn't take place. Number 1, the teachers aren't educated, so they can't teach the students. Okay, seriously. It's just like chess. I became a master chess player, but I wasn't taught. I went and learned it myself. Why? Because my teachers weren't. When I was in high school, I was way ahead of any teacher, not even close. You know, I was number 10 in the country, and they said, well, how'd you learn? I just picked up the books and read it. But that's the only way somebody's going to be educated. And same with financial planning, because it's not taught in our schools because the teacher don't know. Number 2, you could have a conspiracy theory. Why would my wealthy clients want poor people to understand finances? Because then maybe it's going to be competitive out there. In other words, they would become competitive and they would become more financially savvy. Much easier to sell a person a financial product who's not savvy than the one that is. And so number 3, there's no movement at all. It is a very boring topic. You know, financial planning is one of the most boring topics you'll ever meet, unless it affects you and you know really what it does.
Even people who get it affects, it's boring, so boring they don't want to do with it. But there's conspiracy number 2.
Yes,
and then that's the one I've been lecturing on lately, is because the students graduate with such a high debt today. They don't understand interest and all of this stuff.
You know, we could do a whole
show. It is intended to enslave us to continue to have to work.
In 2005, David, in 2005, when the bankruptcy,
it's all about enslavement.
The Bankruptcy Act was changed in 2005.
Oh no, I wrote for years about Elizabeth Warren's fight to not make that happen.
Okay,
I was 6 when it took effect.
Let me tell you, that created a new class that we have in the United States. It's called indentured servants.
Yep.
Okay, because student debt. Okay, Roberto, student debt is non-dischargeable in bankruptcy. Now, for me, it didn't matter. I went on the trust fund account, so it was irrelevant. But if you don't go on that and you go on the debt account, then it does make a difference, because when you come out, you cannot discharge that student debt in bankruptcy, which means you are an indentured servant.
Nick, I've debated people in Washington about this very point, and I've said that we're having the wrong debate about education in America. The debate should not be about should we or not have student loans. It should be, in the complex world we're in and we're moving into, what level of education is required to have a healthy society? And if that means 16 years or 20 years, then we got to figure out how to fund it.
Right.
And we should. And if some people only need an 8th grade education, maybe we should eliminate high school. But let's talk about what we need, and then we'll talk about how to pay for it. I do want to ask you something that you suddenly made me think of about financing college. The 2 youngest of my 8 children, we prepaid their tuition at private colleges, Bryn Mawr and Wellesley.
Yes.
I complained to Wellesley that they took the money for the last semester in December, because I said, look, if you take it in January, the student, when they get a job after college, can take advantage of this tax break. And they said, well, we didn't think about that. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, you know, less than 1% of your daughter's class, 400 people, so 4 or fewer, prepaid the whole 4 years tuition up front.
See, I did.
Now, there were girls, young women my daughter went to school with whose daddy would send the jet to pick them up, right, and take them home for the weekend. Why wouldn't they make the smart move and pay in advance for college? All over the country, it turns out even people who save, they pay each year instead of prepaying.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you do that?
Because they don't know. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Because a lot of the problem with education in America and the financing of it is I don't know. The problem that
my assumption was their rate of return personally was such they didn't care.
And that could be true. In other words, the thing is, it may not
so
make
much effort to think about that.
You know?
A lot of people don't think about these things, David, because they don't know it exists.
Well, okay, but also the millionaire next
Still
door is different than the person who grew up in a millionaire family. Okay, it's just a different attitude. When you're the millionaire next door, you had to do it yourself, and that's a lot of work. Okay, when you grow up in a millionaire family, well, you don't have to do it yourself; you just inherit it, and it's a lot easier. Okay, so the millionaire next door actually studies all the little details of the financial aspects to make sure that they always do things financially proper for them. And by the way, that's most of the millionaires in the United States.
Oh no, I understand. Okay. I still look back at all the financial mistakes I made, despite all my focus on it, writing about this stuff.
Yeah, right. But the thing is, the millionaire that inherited the money, they go, okay, so you lost a couple bucks. Who cares? Because you have so much coming in. And we do have a little bit of a lottery system here. In other words,
that's why in Italy you usually say that the first generation becomes millionaire. Second generation tries to keep the money. Third generation squanders the money.
That's right. That's basically what happens.
And just for you to know that. I was in one of the best university still university in Naples was good, but it's still good. But at the time was one of the best law schools in Italy, and I paid 500 euros, let's say 600.
That's what I spent for dinner.
3.5 years, basically. Right. 3.5 years. So.
Wow.
But on the other side, I had classes with 4,000 people. So,
my law and pre-law students pay about $72,000 a year, not just for me, for the whole education.
Sure.
But that's an unbelievable amount of money to the vast majority of Americans, even with the financial aid that most of the students get. And they all walk out with a lot of debt.
Private school's about $200,000 for the 4 years.
Yeah, but the thing is,
that's not including their living expenses.
Yeah, but it doesn't make it. Most of the degrees you get in a 4-year degree, it doesn't make any financial sense, and you should probably go to a state school or a cheap school, whatever, in order to get your best deal on a 4-year education. You don't need that brand. But then again, we have a big education brand snobbery out there that's just absolutely incredible. And the thing is, like, if you're not Harvard, Yale, University of Chicago, or Stanford, guess what? There's a university called Berkeley. Okay, the Berkeley touts themselves to be a national school. Yet, if you go to their law school, you'll notice they hire 0 people from Southern universities. They all come from these 4 law schools, and then that's it.
I've worked for a U.S. law firm. So, actually, there was one guy who had his LLM in Barclays, and he actually was. Everybody was making jokes about him because he was not from Michigan. Because in Europe, Michigan is one of the biggest. The LLM of Michigan is very important, but he was not from the Magic 4 or 5, and everybody was making jokes about him and fun about him. And the only reason why he was actually hired with the law firm was that one of the Japanese partners went to Berkeley, and actually so they couldn't actually discriminate him just for being at Berkeley because one of the partners was an alumni.
The education snobbery, I call it snobbery. I don't know how else to describe it.
It's snobbery.
Now, I teach at Northeastern University. I'm a professor at the graduate tax program at Northeastern. They did a great job.
Do you fly up there, once a week?
No, dude, this program, let me tell you, I've been on faculty at Northeastern for 10 years. Okay. I started with their program at the Graduate Tax 10 years ago online. It's still online. When I was living in Seattle, I live here now, and it's all online. Here's the good news about Northeastern. They pay, and I told Kim this, twice as much and then some of any other Southern school. Okay. I mean, seriously, because you want to know what do you get paid. And I said, look, I get paid twice as much at Northeastern than you will at University of North Carolina State, or Campbell Law, where I've taught Campbell Law. You get twice as much.
Northeastern.
Okay. But here's the problem with Northeastern. The tuition is like $60,000 a year. I mean, the thing is, they whack their students big time for the tuition. And I'm going, is it really worth it? And I teach for retirement plans. Now, here's the interesting thing, because they pay me so much at Northeastern, they give me a lot of time to do research. So I researched around the country to find out where can you get good education and retirement planning, because it is important, because someday people